Come, let the soft rustle of ancient silence guide us to where timeless stories gently bloom and drift. Over the next 2 hours, let yourself drift into the stories of the forgotten stone path in the quiet woods, the quiet garden beyond the ancient stone wall, and gentle rain falling over patient valley letters. 3 quiet stories gently woven together. Welcome to Night Feather Sleep Stories. The ancient stone road had vanished beneath the weight of ages. Between the oak grove and the pine forest further on, the ground was merely a seamless carpet of fallen leaves, moss, and dark earth. Where once a firm path had linked the 2 woods, now only the hush of neglect remained. Nature had reclaimed the space, covering each slab and every contour with a thick shroud of forgetting. Only in one small stretch, near the roots of a larger tree, did the tip of a gray stone emerge, a quiet reminder of what lay beneath. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories, made to help you relax. And sometimes, that's all we really need. Matthias paused at the edge of the first grove and gazed at that single visible stone. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-kissed earth and damp bark. He wore heavy boots and soft leather gloves, softened by years of use. In his hands, he held a wooden rake and a straight shovel. He walked to the solitary stone, knelt, and touched its cool surface with his fingertips. The rock was solid, unyielding. Matthias's resolve hardened. He would not let the path remain lost. He would bring the road back into the light, stone by stone, until the 2 woods were once more connected. The task's quiet promise was simple and clear. By the end of that day, the ground would again offer sure footing. The crossing would cease to be a treacherous tangle of hidden roots and unseen hollows, transforming into a steadfast line, guiding anyone who needed to journey from one side to the other. Matthias took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs. The wind drifted slowly through the high canopies of the oaks, making the leaves whisper a continuous, gentle sigh. He planted his shovel in the soft earth beside the path and gripped the rake with both hands. The wooden handle was smooth and nestled perfectly in his palm. Matthias took his first step into the overgrown stretch. He set the rake's tines on the ground just behind the gray stone and pulled it towards him. The movement was firm yet unhurried. A thick layer of brown leaves and thin branches yielded, tumbling back. Beneath that first dry covering lay another layer, damper and darker, made of leaves already melting back into the earth. He repeated the gesture. He pulled the rake once more, feeling the accumulated weight of the material. This time, the wooden tines scraped against something hard. The sound was muffled but unmistakable. It was the sound of stone. Matthias pushed aside the mound of damp leaves with his boot, revealing a second slab, perfectly aligned with the first. The stone was earth-stained, yet whole. A small ant scurried, disoriented, across the newly discovered surface, quickly finding refuge in a tiny crevice. The morning sunlight began to dapple through the branches, creating golden patches on the forest floor. Matthias looked ahead. The stretch he needed to clear extended for dozens of yards, curving gently to the left before disappearing into the shadows of the distant pines. It was a long task, demanding repetition and patience. No shortcuts to be found. Every inch of earth needed to be moved with care so as not to damage what lay beneath. He adjusted the gloves on his hands, steadied his feet, and settled his body into the day's rhythm. The surrounding grove seemed to watch in quiet observance, accompanying the beginning of the transformation. The sound of the rake scraping against stone became the steady heartbeat of the grove. Matthias advanced in short steps, pulling the accumulation of years to the sides of the path. The work revealed the anatomy of forgetting. The upper layer was light and crackled, full of sun-twisted oak leaves and dry branches that broke easily. When he dragged this part, the wind helped, carrying the lighter pieces away. But just beneath, the reality was denser. The lower layer demanded continuous strength. It was damp, dark, and heavy compound. The leaves there were glued together by the rains of many seasons. Matthias dug in the rake and pulled, feeling the resistance of the wet earth. The scent that rose was deep and rich, the pure aroma of fertile soil and humus. It was a smell that recalled ancient roots and cool shade. As he cleared away this dark mass, the shape of the road began to emerge with clarity. It was not a path of small, loose stones. These were large, irregular slabs, yet fitted together with a clear purpose. Some were almost rectangular, others had rounded edges, but all formed a flat, continuous puzzle. The color of the rocks varied. Some were a pale gray, almost white under the sunlight. Others leaned towards a leaden hue, darkened by constant moisture. Matthias paused from time to time to push the mound of debris away from the edge, creating small hills of leaves and earth that would soon be absorbed by the forest. The effort warmed his arms and shoulders. The cold morning air no longer bothered him. He took off his thick coat, folded it, and placed it on a fallen log nearby. He remained in just a flannel shirt, which allowed for more freedom of movement. The wind touched his face, bringing immediate relief. He returned to work, finding a rhythm that didn't tire him, a cadence his body accepted naturally. Pull, drag, push aside, advance one step, repeat. At one point, the rake snagged. Matthias didn't force it. He released the tool and knelt on the ground. There was a thick, partially rotten branch lay across the stones and buried in the mud. With his hands protected by the leather gloves, he gripped the branch in the middle. The wood yielded slightly under the pressure of his fingers, soft and spongy. He pulled firmly. The branch detached from the earth with a sucking sound, revealing a clear line of clean stone where it had rested for so long. Small white insects scattered quickly, fleeing the sudden light. Matthias lifted the branch and gently tossed it into the midst of the trees. He picked up the rake again and cleared the earth that had remained under the dead wood. 2 more slabs appeared, perfectly flat. The path now had a visible extension. Looking back, Matthias could see a strip of clear stone cutting through the sea of brown leaves. It was a beautiful and comforting contrast. The road seemed to breathe, relieved of the weight that had suffocated it. The sun slowly climbed the sky, and the light passing through the leaves shifted from a pale gold to a vibrant yellow, warming the newly discovered stones. With each conquered yard, the sense of progress accumulated. It wasn't a sudden change, but a slow revelation. The sound of birds accompanied the rhythm of his work. A sharp, short song came from the highest canopies, answered by a soft trill somewhere closer to the ground. Matthias felt a light sweat on his forehead. He continued to advance, guided by the line of stones, letting the road's shape dictate the direction of his steps. The surface was clear, but the edges still held their own obstacles. The central part of the path was exposed, but the sides seemed to struggle to reclaim lost ground. Over the years, the undergrowth had advanced unchecked. Thick ferns leaned over the stones, and thin roots crossed the slabs like coarse spider webs, seeking earth on the other side. Matthias leaned the rake against a tree and picked up a smaller tool. It was a curved blade with a short, ergonomic wooden handle, perfect for precise cuts close to the ground. He knelt at the edge of the path, feeling the hardness of the stone beneath his knees, and began to work on the right margin. He held a handful of ivy that encroached upon the slab. The leaves were deep green, shiny and firm. With his other hand, he ran the blade at the base of the stems where they met the earth. The cut was clean and produced a dry snap. Matthias pulled the mass of leaves, and the root yielded, detaching from the stone with a slight tearing sound. As he removed the plant, he revealed the straight edge of the slab. The difference was immediate. The road gained contour, gaining a clear boundary that separated it from the organic chaos of the forest. He advanced on his knees, cutting and pulling. The scent of green, fresh sap filled the air, a sharp aroma that contrasted with the heavy smell of damp earth. Some roots were more stubborn. They had grown into the small gaps between the lateral slabs, thickening over time and pushing the earth upwards. For these, Matthias used the tip of the blade to loosen the surrounding soil before pulling. When the root finally came out, it brought with it a small clod of dark earth, leaving the gap clean and empty. The work demanded focus in his hands. He felt the rough texture of dry stems, the softness of new leaves, and the constant coolness of the stone. Each plant removed was a small visual relief. The edge of the path emerged, drawing a continuous line that snaked gently through the terrain. Where before there had been only a confused transition between stone and brush, now there was order. The road showed its true width, spacious enough for two people to walk side by side without touching the branches at the sides. After clearing a long stretch of the right margin, Matthias stood up, stretched his back, and moved to the other side. The left margin was dominated by clumps of tall, pale grass, whose thin blades curved over the stone, creating a curtain that hid the ground. He grasped the clumps near the root and used the blade in a swift motion, cutting the grass close to the soil. The sound of the cut was soft, like the tearing of thick fabric. He gathered the bundles of cut grass and neatly deposited them at the foot of a nearby oak. The sun was already high, almost directly overhead. The light fell straight through the openings in the tree canopy, illuminating the fine dust that rose with the movement of the plants. The air was warmer, and the silence of the grove seemed deeper, interrupted only by the rhythmic sound of Matthias's work. The cut, the pull, the discard. Gradually, the entire road gained a frame. The gray stones now stood out clearly against the dark green of the leaves and the brown of the earth at the sides. The path not only existed again, it displayed its original form, with sharp edges that guided the eye towards the interior of the second grove. With its surface clean and edges defined, the road revealed its true condition. Most of the stones had withstood time well, remaining firm and level. However, the forest floor is alive and constantly in motion. Thick roots grow and push the earth. Heavy rains wash away foundations, and winter ice expands and contracts the ground. As he walked along the newly discovered stretch, Matthias felt the ground yield slightly under his boot. He stopped and looked down. There was a rectangular stone, larger than the others, that was tilted. One of its corners had sunk into the soft earth, while the opposite side rose above the path's level, creating a dangerous step. When he stepped on it, the rock wobbled with a dull thud, knocking against its neighbor. A safe road cannot have loose stones. Matthias went to where he had left his tools and brought a heavy iron bar with one end flattened and a canvas bucket containing coarse sand and pebbles that he had prepared earlier. He approached the loose stone and assessed the situation. The gap between it and the other rocks was filled with dark mud and thin roots that offered no real support. He inserted the flattened end of the iron bar into the widest crevice, right at the point where the stone had sunk. Holding the bar with both hands, he levered it, using the edge of the neighboring stone as a fulcrum. The stone's weight was considerable. Matthias tensed his muscles in his arms and legs, pushing the bar down. The stone resisted for a second, held by the vacuum of the mud, and then yielded with a wet sound. It slowly rose. Matthias slid a thick branch under it to keep it lifted and removed the iron bar. With his gloved hands, he tilted the heavy slab to the side, letting it rest outside the hole. The revealed space was a cavity of black, pasty earth. Water from past rains had accumulated there, softening the base until it could no longer support the stone's weight. Matthias took a small hand shovel and began to scrape away the soft mud. He dug until he found firm, dry earth, removing all the unstable material. The smell of damp minerals rose from the newly cleaned hole. Next, he pulled the canvas bucket. With cupped hands, he scooped handfuls of coarse sand mixed with small stones and poured them into the bottom of the cavity. The sand fell with a rough, dry sound. He spread the material evenly, creating a level and firm bed. He pressed the sand with his hands, ensuring there were no empty spaces. He added a little more in the corner that used to sink, compensating for the terrain's slope. It was time to return the stone to its place. Matthias held the slab by its sides. The surface was rough and scratched the leather of his gloves. He lifted it with concentrated effort, feeling the dense weight in the center of his body, and guided it back into the hole. He lowered the slab slowly, avoiding trapping his fingers. The rock settled onto the bed of sand with a heavy, definitive sound, a solid impact that did not reverberate. Matthias stood up and stepped on the stone. He put his full weight on it. The ground did not move. He swayed his body, trying to force some unevenness, but the rock was perfectly settled, level with its neighbors. The unstable, hollow sound had disappeared, replaced by the silent firmness of a job well done. He repeated this process 3 more times along the path, finding stones that had come loose or sunk over time. Each rock lifted, each hole cleaned and filled with new sand, restored the road's structural integrity. The physical effort was great, and Matthias's breathing was deep and measured. His gloves became covered in gray dust and black earth. When the last stone was fixed, he walked from end to end along the restored stretch. His steps echoed uniformly. There were no more stumbles, no more wobbles. The road was solid, ready to bear the weight of any traveler, as it had been on the day it was built. The path's structure was perfect, firm and well-defined, but the surface of the stones still bore the marks of time. A thin layer of dry earth, dust, and crumbled leaf debris covered the slabs, leaving everything with a dull, opaque appearance. The true color of the road remained hidden beneath this veil of accumulated grime. Matthias picked up a rustic broom, made with thin, stiff branches tied firmly to a long wooden handle. He positioned himself at the beginning of the path and began to sweep. The movement was broad and methodical. He dragged the broom from left to right, pushing the fine dust towards the edge of the grove. The sound of the dry branches scraping against the stone was harsh, like a constant murmur accompanying his slow steps. With each pass, a small cloud of dust rose into the air and slowly descended, carried by the light breeze that blew through the tree trunks.
As he swept, he felt the texture of the ground change. Where before his boot had slipped lightly over loose earth, now it met the clean grip of the rock. He advanced along the path, cleaning every crevice, removing the dust accumulated in the small natural depressions of the slabs. The work was light compared to the effort of lifting the stones, allowing his muscles to relax a little. As he swept the last stretch, the light in the grove began to shift. The sun, which had shone intensely, was covered by a blanket of gray clouds that spread silently across the sky. These were not storm clouds, heavy and dark, but rather a soft, slate-colored covering that transformed the daylight into a diffuse, shadowless clarity. The wind stopped completely. The leaves on the trees became still. And then it began. The first drop fell on a clean stone, leaving a round, dark mark. Then another, a little further ahead. In a few seconds, a very fine, steady rain began to fall over the grove. It was a gentle drizzle, whose drops were so small they seemed to float before touching the ground. Matthias stopped sweeping and stepped back a few paces, sheltering under the dense canopy of a large oak. He leaned against the rough trunk and watched. The rain made no loud noise, just a soft hiss as it touched the thousands of leaves around him. The smell of the forest changed instantly. The dry aroma of dust gave way to the unmistakable perfume of wet earth and damp stone, a fresh and purifying scent that filled the air. He watched the road react to the water. The fine drizzles settled the dust that still lingered in the air and began to wash the surface of the stones. As the water covered the slabs, the true nature of the path revealed itself. The fine dust turned into thin mud and flowed into the crevices, leaving the rock surface clean and shining. The colors, once mudded, came to life. Matthias could see that the stones were not all alike. There were slabs of silvery blue, reflecting the soft light of the cloudy sky. Others had veins of dark green, the color of ancient moss embedded in the rock itself. Some smaller stones had white specks that sparkled under the thin layer of water. The wet road looked like a river of calm stones cutting through the forest. The contrast between the clean, shining path and the dark edges of the wet earth was absolute. The rain lasted as long as necessary. It washed the leaves, cleared the air, and purified the path. Gradually, the drizzle lessened until it stopped completely. The silence that followed was damp and tranquil, broken only by the occasional sound of a heavy drop falling from a high leaf and hitting the ground. The sun began to reappear through gaps in the clouds, casting oblique rays of light that made the wet path shimmer. The road was clean, washed by the grove itself, breathing a sigh of relief after so many years covered by the earth. The path now glimmed, clean and level for almost its entire length. Only one stretch remained. Exactly at the midpoint between the oak grove and the pine forest, the terrain curved slightly and descended, forming a small natural depression. It was the lowest point of the crossing. And there, the problem was different. Water from past rains with nowhere to drain had accumulated at the bottom of this basin. The stones in this section were not just covered with leaves, but submerged in a thick layer of slippery, dark mud,
A murky puddle rested on the road, stagnant, blocking passage. The slabs at the bottom were invisible. If anyone tried to cross there, their boots would sink into the mud and slip on the hidden stones. The road was interrupted.
Matthias walked to the edge of the puddle. He didn't try to clear the mud immediately, knowing that the water would accumulate again with the next rain. The road needed permanent relief. He looked at the sides of the path. The terrain to the right rose towards a gentle hill, but the terrain to the left continued to descend slowly among the trees. That's where the water should go. He picked up the straight shovel. The wooden handle was cool and slightly damp. Matthias stepped off the stone road onto the left margin and plunged the metal blade into the soft earth, a few inches from the stagnant puddle. He pushed the shovel with his boot, cutting through the dark soil full of fine roots. The sound of metal tearing through the wet earth was dense and satisfying. He lifted a square of earth and deposited it further ahead among the trees. He began to dig a small channel, a narrow, shallow ditch that started from the edge of the road and moved away towards the lower part of the groove. With each shovel of earth removed, the path for the water became clearer. He dug with constant movements, keeping the bottom of the channel sloped to ensure gravity did its work. The smell of fresh clay rose strongly with each turned piece of soil. When the channel reached about 2 meters in length, moving far enough from the road, Matthias returned to the starting point, near the puddle. All that remained was to break the last barrier of earth that held the accumulated water over the stones. He positioned the shovel and cut through this small natural dike. The reaction was immediate. The muddy water found its escape. With a continuous liquid murmur, the puddle began to drain. The dark water flowed into the newly dug channel, running cheerfully among the roots and disappearing into the porous forest of the distant forest. Matthias watched the water level drop rapidly. Where before there had been an opaque mirror, the shapes of the submerged stones began to emerge. When the water stopped flowing, only a layer of thick mud remained on the slabs at the bottom. He took the broom of stiff branches and, taking advantage of the moisture, swept the mud forcefully towards the edge, pushing it off the path. The mud yielded, thick and heavy, finally revealing the central stones of the depression. They were the largest of all the road, great rectangular blocks designed precisely to support the point of greatest tension in the terrain. He used his boot to scrape the last traces of mud from the gaps between the stones. The depression was now clean. The water had its own path to follow, and the road was free. There were no more puddles, no slippery mud, no interruptions. The continuous stretch of gray stone extended from the roots of the oaks, descended through the gentle curve, and rose again, merging with the welcoming shadow of the pines. The structural work was complete. The wound in the grove had been closed. The afternoon sun began its descent, shifting the tone of the light filtering through the leaves. The gold deepened, almost orange, casting long, soft shadows along the forest floor. Matthias gathered his tools. He wiped the shovel blade on the grass, dusted the rake handle, and placed the iron bar beside the empty canvas bucket. He left everything organized near the large oak where he had sheltered from the rain hours earlier. He removed his leather gloves. His hands were warm, marked by continuous effort, his skin feeling the cool, open air after a full day confined. He rubbed his palms together,
and walked back to the exact spot where he had started that morning, the boundary of the first grove.
Matthias stopped and looked ahead. The transformation was silent, yet complete. Where before there had been only a continuous, confused carpet of dead leaves and neglect, now lay a ribbon of clean, clear, and intentional stone. The road seemed to belong to that place, not as an invasion, but as an ancient, respectful agreement between stone and earth. The edges were perfectly delineated, separating the order of the path from the wild growth of the woods. The stones, washed by the drizzle and dried by the afternoon breeze, displayed their shades of gray, blue, and moss green with quiet pride. He took the first step. The sole of his leather boot met the flat surface of the first slab. The sound was firm, a dry, comforting thud. There was no crackle of breaking dry branches, nor the soft, uncertain sink into hidden mud. There was only the solid, immediate response of the rock. Matthias began to walk. He was in no hurry. Each step was a confirmation of work well done. He felt the absolute stability of the ground. The weight of his body was received by a base that did not yield, did not wobble, and did not slip. The sound of his own footsteps created a new rhythm in the grove. It was the sound of return, the sound of use. The road was alive again because it was being walked upon. He followed the gentle curve the path made as it wound around the exposed root of a centuries-old tree. The road respected the terrain, flowing gracefully around natural obstacles. He noticed how the temperature seemed to shift slightly as he advanced. The air near the clean ground was cooler, free from the heat generated by the decomposition of piled leaves. He reached the midpoint, the small natural basin that had once held the stagnant puddle. He descended the slight incline. His steps echoed a little more gravely on the larger slabs. The ground there was perfectly dry. He looked to his left and saw the small channel he had dug. The surrounding earth was damp, but the water had already been completely absorbed by the forest. The solution was simple, invisible to anyone merely passing by, but essential for the path's survival. Matthias continued to ascend the slight rise on the other side of the basin. The scent of oak was gradually replaced by the sharp, clean aroma of pine resin. The ground around the road changed from broad brown leaves to thin needles and dry pine cones. The transition between the two groves happened naturally, and the road was the thread that stitched these two worlds together. As he walked, he didn't dwell on the effort he had made. The slight ache in his shoulders and the tiredness in his legs seemed distant. His mind was focused only on the sensation of walking, on the firmness of the stone beneath his feet, and on the clarity of the path. There was no need to constantly look down to avoid stumbling. He could keep his head high, observing the tall trunks, feeling the breeze on his face, fully trusting the ground that supported him. The connection was remade. Matthias reached the end of the path. The last stone slab met the firm earth of the pine forest, blending smoothly with the needle-covered ground. He stepped beyond the road into the soft earth and paused. The crossing was complete. He didn't turn back immediately. Instead, he walked to a tall, robust pine tree that grew near the path's edge. Its trunk was straight, covered with thick, fragmented bark that smelled of dry sap. Matthias leaned his left shoulder against the tree, crossed his arms over his chest, and let his body's weight rest against the firm wood. He exhaled slowly and deeply, feeling a profound relaxation wash over his tired muscles. From there, he had a perfect view of the entire length of the path he had just traversed. The
The road unfolded before him, a clear line of stone cutting through the shadows of the trees and disappearing into the distant curve towards the oaks. The sun finally dipped below the tree line. The grove lost its direct light, plunging into the soft, bluish clarity of twilight. In this late afternoon light, the stones seemed to absorb the last of the day's brightness. The path glowed faintly in the approaching dark, like a pale ribbon guiding the eye through the forest. The night wind began to blow, colder and steadier, passing through the tops of the pines with a sound reminiscent of distant ocean waves. Matthias remained in silence, simply observing. There was nothing more to be done, no leaf to be moved, no stone to be adjusted. The road was there, still, patient, and complete. It asked no haste. It knew how to wait. It would withstand the next rain, the falling leaves of autumn, and the cold of winter. It was ready for whoever might need it, today or many years from now. He felt the scent of night rising from the cold earth. Gradually, the shadows swallowed the details of the trees, leaving only the large, dark forms of the trunks. But the path remained visible, a secure presence in the midst of the woods. Matthias closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the wind and the calm breath of the grove. The work was finished. Balance had returned. He pushed off the tree, adjusted the collar of his shirt, and began to walk back, slowly and silently, guided by the firmness of the stone beneath his feet.
The very back of the property had always been defined by a tall wall of ancient stones. It was a sturdy structure, built many decades ago, its irregular blocks joined by mortar that time had darkened. Over the years, nature had fully embraced this barrier. A thick curtain of ivy cascaded from the top all the way to the ground, forming a continuous green wall that swayed ever so gently when the breeze whispered through. Tomas had known that wall since he first arrived. He had grown accustomed to gazing at that mass of dark leaves, accepting it as the boundary, the very edge of the space. But that morning, something in the sunlight revealed a detail that had previously gone unnoticed. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories made to help you relax. And sometimes, that's all we really need. There was a subtle depression in the curtain of leaves, a straight vertical line that didn't seem natural. Tomas walked slowly over the dew-kissed grass, approaching the back of the property. The air was fresh, carrying the clean scent of morning. He stopped before the green wall and reached out. His fingers touched the cool ivy leaves, and he began to push aside the thick branches. The plant was densely intertwined, forming a resistant web. He pulled the cluster of vines to the side, feeling the fibers' resistance, and the sound of dry leaves breaking accompanied the movement. Behind that thick layer of vegetation, his fingertips found something hard, smooth, and cold. It wasn't stone, it was wood. He used both hands to open a wider space in the ivy curtain. The stems yielded with a muffled snap, revealing the surface of a door. It was a solid wooden door, darkened by time and dampness, set right into the stone wall. The top of the door formed a gentle arch,
mirroring the surrounding stone structure. Tomas felt a quiet curiosity bloom within him. He continued to pull at the climbing vines, tearing away the stems that had rooted themselves in the wood's crevices. The scent of damp earth and crushed sap rose into the air as he cleared the entrance. In the center of the door, there was a large, darkened iron ring covered by a thin layer of rust and moss. Tomas ran his hand over the metal. The texture was rough, bearing the marks of time it had spent exposed to the elements, untouched. He grasped the ring. The metal was cold. He pulled the fixture upwards. There was a sharp creak, a sound of iron scraping against iron that broke the morning silence. The ring moved with difficulty, but it yielded. Tomas placed his other hand on the wooden surface and pushed. The door didn't budge. It seemed welded to the ground by the accumulation of earth and dead leaves at its base. He stepped back, looked at the door's bottom, and used his boot to clear away the thick layer of debris that had piled up there. The earth was compacted, dark and heavy. He scraped the sole of his boot several times, creating a small furrow beneath the wood. Then he grasped the iron ring again, braced his feet, and pushed with the full weight of his body. The wood groaned. A deep, long sound echoed through the stones. The ancient hinges creaked, releasing tiny flakes of rust that fell to the ground. The door yielded a few inches, pushing the loose earth before it. Tomas took a deep breath and pushed again. The space opened just enough for him to pass through. A breath of cold, still air escaped from within, carrying a profound scent of dormant earth, long fallen leaves, and dampness preserved in shadow.
He released the ring and stepped through the open gap. His eyes needed a few moments to adjust to the change in light. What he saw on the other side made him stop in silent awe. Behind the wall, there was a garden, not an empty space, but a place once cared for, now completely surrendered to nature's wild growth. The ground was covered by a thick carpet of dry leaves and tall weeds. Shrubs had grown unchecked, stretching long, thin branches in every direction. In the center, large trees extended their arms, forming a canopy of leaves that allowed only narrow beams of sunlight to pass through. It was a space contained by high walls on all four sides, a secret square that time had forgotten. The silence within was different here. It was a dense quiet, shielded from the wind and distant sounds. Tomas took a step forward. The tall, dry grass brushed against his legs. He looked to his left, where a mound of foliage seemed to hide a stone structure, and then to his right, where the dry branches of a tree touched the ground. Despite the neglect, there was a tranquil beauty in the way nature had filled every space. The place didn't seem dead, merely dormant. He looked at his own hands, still smudged with earth and ivy sap. The fresh air of the hidden garden touched his face. There was no urgency, no rush, but an immediate clarity settled in his mind. This space yearned to breathe again. This garden needed to be rediscovered, layer by layer. Tomas decided he would spend the next few days here. He would clear, organize, restore what lay hidden beneath the weight of time. He took one last look around, feeling the quietude of the surroundings, and turned to go back through the half-open door. He needed to fetch his tools. The work was about to begin. Tomas returned to the hidden garden, carrying a pair of thick leather gloves, long-handled pruning shears, a machete, and a metal rake. He stepped through the heavy wooden door and set the tools on the ground, near the entrance. The air within the walled space began to warm slightly as the sun climbed higher in the sky, but the shade of the large trees still kept the atmosphere cool and damp. He pulled on his gloves, feeling the stiffness of the leather mold to his fingers. The first step was to clear a path. The tall weeds and unruly shrubs dominated almost the entire surface, creating a visual and physical barrier within the first few feet. He picked up the pruning shears. The tool was heavy, with sharp blades and polished wooden handles. Tomas approached the first large bush that blocked the way. Its branches were long, thin, and full of small thorns, growing in a chaotic tangle. He positioned the shears blade at the base of one of the thicker branches and squeezed the handles. The sound of a dry, clean snap echoed through the garden. The branch fell, opening a small gap in the foliage. He repeated the motion. Snap after snap, the shears cut through green wood and dry wood with the same precision. The rhythm of the cutting became constant. Cut, pull the loose branch, toss it aside. The scent of fresh sap began to spread through the air, a green, astringent, and vibrant aroma that contrasted with the smell of old earth and decaying leaves. Each time a cluster of branches was removed, a little more light reached the dark ground. When the main bush was reduced to a manageable base, Tomas picked up the machete to tackle the tall weeds. The blade sliced through the air with a soft hum, striking the stems of the weeds near their roots. The sound was gentle, a continuous rustle of falling vegetation. He advanced slowly, swinging his arm in a rhythmic motion from right to left. The effort began to warm his shoulders and arms. He felt the weight of the movement, the resistance of the thicker plants, and the ease with which the finer leaves yielded.
Behind him, a trail of debris-covered earth began to form. The space was being reclaimed step by step. He paused for a moment, wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his cotton shirt, and looked back. The contrast was evident. Where before there had been an impenetrable wall of weeds, now there was an open path, flanked by piles of cut vegetation. The environment seemed to have sighed, gaining width and depth. Tomas leaned the machete against the wall and picked up the metal rake. The ground was covered by a layer of dry leaves that must have accumulated for years. They were dark leaves, damp underneath and brittle on the surface. He extended his arm and pulled the rake towards him. The metal teeth scraped the earth with a harsh, satisfying sound. The movement dragged a large quantity of dead leaves, twigs, and root remains, revealing the black, compacted earth. He pulled the rake again, creating a clean line on the ground. The scent of the exposed earth rose immediately. It was a rich, deep smell, reminiscent of rain and roots. He continued his work, forming small piles of leaves and debris along the edges of the garden. The constant sound of metal scraping the earth created a repetitive and calming melody. Pull, gather, advance. The physical effort was continuous but unhurried. He felt the soil's texture changing beneath his boots as the soft layer of leaves gave way to the firmness of the bare earth. On one of the rake's passes, the tool caught on something resistant. It wasn't a root. The sound was not that of wood yielding, but a dull, hard, dry thud. He stopped. He pulled the rake back and looked at the ground. Beneath the thin layer of earth that still remained, there was a grayish edge. He knelt, feeling the dampness of the soil seep through the fabric of his pants. With gloved hands, he began to clear away the loose earth around that edge. The material was rough and cold. He dug a little deeper with his fingers, pushing the decomposed leaves aside. Gradually, the shape of a flat, rectangular stone emerged from the soil's darkness. It was perfectly level, though covered by a thin layer of dark moss. He rubbed the stone's surface with the palm of his hand, revealing its light gray color beneath the grime. He looked ahead, imagining the line that stone pointed to. With his hands, he scraped the earth a few inches further. His fingers found another hard surface. He cleared the area. Another stone, identical to the first, separated by a small space of earth. He had found a path, a stone path that crossed the garden, completely swallowed by time and vegetation, silently waiting beneath the surface. The discovery changed how he saw the space. The garden wasn't just a fenced-off patch of land. It had a backbone, an intention, a route someone had laid out long ago. Tomas slowly stood up, shaking the earth from his knees. He looked at the invisible line the stones suggested, stretching towards the center of the hidden garden. The clearing work had revealed the place's first structure. He picked up the rake again, but now his movements would be different. He wasn't just cleaning the ground, he was unearthing the path that would guide his next steps. The stone path became the focus of Tomas's attention. To bring it back to the surface, the rake was no longer enough. He brought a small, rounded shovel, a stiff, bristled brush, and a bucket of water. The work required closeness to the ground. He knelt at the beginning of the trail, near the entrance door, and began to investigate the path's full extent.
The first stone was clear, but the followings were almost entirely submerged in the black, compacted earth. Tomas dug the tip of the small shovel into the edge of the second stone. The earth was hard, clinging to the sides of the gray block from years of rain and compression. He forced the shovel down and used it as a lever. The earth yielded in solid blocks, detaching from the stone's edges with a muffled sound. He used his hands to remove the pieces of earth, piling them to the side. The next stone was sunken, uneven compared to the others. Time and water had washed away its supporting base, causing it to tilt to one side. Tomas dug the shovel deeply beneath the stone and pulled the handle back. The heavy stone shifted. He held it with both hands, feeling the rough texture and dense weight of the material, and lifted it from the hole. The bottom revealed a mixture of dark sand and thin white roots that had infiltrated the empty space. He cleaned the roots with his fingers, pulling the fragile threads that broke easily. Then he took some of the loose, dry earth that had accumulated on the edges and put it into the bottom of the hole, creating a new bed. He spread the earth with his hand, leveling the surface. Carefully, he lifted the stone again and lowered it into its original place. The block settled with a solid thud. Tomas pressed the top of the stone with both hands, applying his body weight. It didn't wobble, it was firm, aligned with the previous ones. He advanced along the path, stone by stone. The process was slow and methodical, digging the edges, loosening the hardened earth, checking the level, lifting sunken stones, filling the base, replacing them. The sound of the metal shovel scraping against the stone became the soundtrack of that morning. It was a sharp, quick sound, followed by the soft sound of earth being removed. The constant scent of damp soil and exposed roots enveloped Tomas as he worked. His leather gloves became covered in a thick layer of dark mud. In some parts of the path, moss had created a thick green crust over the stones. It was wet moss, almost like heavy velvet. In these moments, Tomas set the shovel aside and picked up the stiff bristled brush. He dipped the brush into the bucket of water. Drops dripped onto the ground as he carried the brush to the stone. He scrubbed the surface vigorously. The water mixed with the moss and earth, creating a brown foam that trickled down the sides of the stone. The sound of the brush scraping the stone was harsh and rhythmic. Scrub, wet, scrub again. Gradually, the green and brown gave way to the pale, clean gray of the original material. Tomas used an old cloth to wipe away the excess water and grime. The wet stone gleamed under the filtered light that fell from the trees, revealing small veins and imperfections on its surface. It was gratifying to see the light color emerging from the dark, block after block. The path made a gentle curve in the middle of the garden, winding around the base of one of the large trees. Tomas followed the curve, unearthing the stones that had been almost swallowed by the thick roots growing on the surface. He took care not to harm the ancient roots, merely clearing the space around them and adjusting the stones so they coexisted with the tree's dark wood. The interaction between the man-cut gray stone and the time-shaped brown root created a natural design on the ground. After hours of careful work, he reached the end of the trail, which terminated near the wall opposite the entrance. Tomas slowly stood up, feeling the stiffness in his legs and back. He took off his dirty gloves and placed them on the wall. The air felt lighter now, warmed by the sun as it approached midday.
He walked back to the beginning of the path near the wooden door. He turned and looked at the completed work. Where before there had only been a continuous floor of rotten leaves and dark earth, now there was a clear, defined line. The gray stone path contrasted sharply with the clean soil around it. The stones were level, clean, solid. They invited one to walk. The garden's structure was beginning to make sense. The path guided the eye, organized the space, and established an order that had been lost. Tomas stepped on the first stone. He felt the firmness beneath his boot. The sound of his step on the clean stone was short and dry. He walked to the center of the garden, following the trail he himself had brought back into the light. The ground was ready. Now he needed to look up. In the center of the garden, flanking the curve of the newly uncovered stone path, stood two ancient trees. Their trunks were thick, covered in deep, wrinkled bark, marked by shades of dark brown and gray. Their canopies were immense, but they were suffocated. Over years of neglect, many branches had dried and died, yet remained entangled in the tree's structure. These dead branches formed a brittle gray web that blocked the sunlight, preventing rays from reaching the soil and stifling the growth of new leaves. The air under the trees felt stagnant, trapped in a cage of dry wood. Tomas brought a light but sturdy aluminum ladder and a pruning saw with a curved blade and sharp teeth. He also picked up smaller pruning shears for the thinner branches. He stopped under the first tree and looked up, studying the canopy structure. It was easy to distinguish dead wood from live wood. The dry branches were opaque, rigid, lacking the subtle flexibility of branches carrying sap. They crossed the space in a disordered tangle, rubbing against each other when a rare breeze managed to pass. He opened the ladder and firmly set its 4 rubber feet on the leveled earth beside the stone path. He shook the structure with his hands to ensure it was stable. Satisfied, he placed the pruning saw in his tool belt and began to climb. The aluminum steps creaked faintly under the weight of his boots. Upon reaching the middle of the ladder, he was immersed in the lower part of the canopy. The scent there was different from the grounds. It was a dry, dusty aroma, with a hint of old wood and dehydrated bark. Tomas chose his first target, a thick, barkless branch that projected horizontally, casting a large shadow over a significant area of the garden. He held the branch with his left hand. Its texture was rough and cold. With his right, he drew the saw and positioned its curved teeth at the branch's base, near the main trunk. He pulled the saw towards him. The metal teeth bit into the hard wood with a harsh sound. He pushed the blade and pulled again, establishing a rhythm. Zuzz, 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 zuzz. The saw's cut through the dry wood sliced the garden's silence. A fine shower of yellowish sawdust began to fall, floating slowly in the still air and dusting Tomas's shirt. The dead wood offered resistance, but the blade was sharp. With each stroke, the groove deepened. The tension in the branch began to shift. Tomas felt the vibration of the cut through the hand holding the wood. He slowed the saw. With a sharp, sudden snap, the last wood fibers broke. The heavy branch came loose. Tomas guided it so it didn't hit the ladder and let it fall. The thud of the branch hitting the soft earth raised a small cloud of dark dust on the ground. Immediately, something changed. With the removal of that obstacle, a direct beam of sunlight pierced the canopy and struck the garden floor. It was a pillar of golden light, bright and warm, illuminating a stretch of the stone path. Tomas looked at the illuminated ground and felt the satisfaction of the space opening.
He continued the work. He moved along the ladder, reaching smaller branches with the pruning shears. Clack, clack. The thin, dry branches fell quickly, raining onto the clean grass. When an area was clear, he would descend, move the ladder to another point on the trunk, check its stability, and climb again. The process demanded concentration and strength. His arms began to ache with the continuous effort of sawing above shoulder height. Sweat trickled down his neck, mixing with the fine sawdust that covered his skin. On the second tree, the tangle was even worse. Two large, dry branches had crossed and locked into each other, forming a knot of dead wood. Tomas positioned the ladder with care. He needed to saw the first branch into two parts to free it. The scent of sawdust filled the air, a warm, woody smell. When the knot was finally undone and the pieces fell to the ground, a large portion of the canopy opened up. The change in the environment was profound. The oppressive ceiling of dead branches had disappeared. Now the blue sky was visible through the remaining green leaves. Sunlight no longer fell in narrow, timid beams, but in large, bright patches that warmed the earth and stones. The air began to circulate freely. A light breeze passed through the garden, and Tomas could hear the soft rustle of live leaves swaying, a green whisper that had once been muffled by the dry wood. He descended from the ladder for the last time and put away the pruning saw. The ground around the trees was covered with cut branches, sawdust, and loose bark. He spent the next few minutes gathering the wood, breaking the smaller branches with his hands, and piling everything in a corner of the property, near the stone wall. When the ground was clean again, Tomas stood on the stone path and looked at the trees. They seemed taller, lighter. Their natural forms had been restored. Without the weight of the dead wood, the live branches appeared to stretch towards the newly discovered light. The garden breathed. The shade was now dappled with sun, creating a mosaic of light and darkness over the bare earth. The environment had lost its sense of confinement. It was open, clean, and ready to receive new life. With sunlight now bathing much of the garden, details previously hidden in the shadows began to reveal themselves. In the right corner, near the back stone wall, lay a large mound covered by a thick tarp of ivy and accumulated leaves. The light struck it directly, highlighting the mound's irregular shape, which didn't seem to be just a pile of earth. Tomas walked towards it, feeling the sun's warmth on his back. He pulled away the vines covering the structure. They yielded easily, revealing the edge of a carved stone basin. It was a small fountain set against the wall. The structure was simple, a semicircular basin projecting from the wall, supported by a smooth stone base. Above the basin, emerging directly from the wall's stones, was a small metal pipe, darkened by oxidation.
The basin, however, was completely full, not with water, but with thick black mud, formed by years of decomposed leaves and dust. Small weeds had rooted in that sludge, transforming the fountain into a forgotten planter. The metal pipe was blocked by a hard crust of limestone and dry dirt. The silence of that garden's corner confirmed that the water had stopped flowing long ago. Tomas went to fetch smaller tools, a metal spatula, a steel brush, an empty bucket, and a piece of stiff wire. He knelt before the stone basin. The smell of the stagnant mud was strong, a heavy aroma of swamp and damp organic matter. He took the spatula and dug its tip into the thick mud. The texture was dense, almost like clay. He began to remove large chunks of black mud, dropping them into the empty bucket. The wet, heavy sound of the mud falling into the plastic echoed softly.
He worked methodically, emptying the basin layer by layer. As he neared the bottom, the spatula scraped against the original stone, producing a sharp, hollow sound. He removed the last roots clinging to the bottom, revealing a small metal drain completely clogged with compacted dirt. He used the tip of the spatula to scrape the crust over the drain. The dirt broke loose in dry flakes, revealing the small drainage holes. With the basin mostly empty of mud, Tomas picked up the steel brush. He vigorously scrubbed the inner walls of the stone basin. The brush scratched the surface with a harsh sound, dislodging remnants of dry moss and encrusted earth. Dark dust rose into the air. The stone, once black with grime, began to reveal its natural color, a light gray granite with small sparkling points that reflected the sunlight. Now, the challenge was the metal pipe in the wall. Tomas stood up and examined the small outlet. The tip was blocked by a hard plug of earth and limestone. He took the piece of stiff wire and inserted its end into the pipe's opening. He pushed carefully, feeling the resistance of the accumulated dirt. The wire scraped against the metal's interior with a thin sound. He twisted the wire, forcing it to pierce the blockage. Small pieces of dry earth fell into the clean basin. He pushed the wire deeper, twisting and pulling, loosening the internal crust. Suddenly, the wire passed straight through. The resistance vanished. He pulled the wire back. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The garden remained silent. Then, a damp sound came from within the wall, a muffled gurgle, as if water was struggling to find its way back. Tomas took a step back and watched. A dark, thick drop of muddy water dripped from the pipe and fell into the stone basin. Plink. The sound was crisp. Then another drop. Plink. The rhythm began to quicken. The drops transformed into a thin stream of dark water, carrying the remaining earth that had been trapped in the pipe. The muddy water flowed down the basin's walls and began to descend through the newly unblocked drain. Tomas watched the water flow. The thin stream gained strength. The pressure slowly increased. The water's color began to change. The dark brown lightened, becoming translucent, until finally a continuous flow of clear, transparent water began to gush from the metal pipe. The clean water struck the bottom of the stone basin with a joyful and constant sound. That sound transformed the garden. The gentle murmur of running water filled the space, breaking the dense silence that had dominated the place. It was a fresh, continuous sound that brought a sense of movement and uninterrupted life. The water filled the shallow basin, creating small ripples on the surface, and then flowed tranquilly down the drain.
disappearing into the soil. Tomas rested his hand on the basin. The stone began to cool with the continuous contact of the water. He dipped his fingers into the flow emerging from the pipe. The water was icy cold, pure. He washed his hands, scrubbing the earth from his fingers, feeling the current wash away the day's grime. The water ran over his hands and fell back into the basin, sparkling under the sunlight filtering through the pruned branches. The fountain was alive. The garden's heart had begun to beat again. The garden now had light, a path, and water. Its fundamental structures were clean and restored. However, the earthen edges along the stone path and near the walls lay bare. The dark earth, turned over by the rake and cleared of dead leaves, formed empty beds that awaited something new. Tomas had prepared the ground, and now was the moment to bring color and texture back to those margins.
He brought several heavy bags of new topsoil, rich in compost, and a wooden box filled with small seedlings in plastic pots. These were hardy plants with varied foliage, some with broad green leaves, others with small touches of purple and silver at their tips, and some that would bear tiny white flowers. He also brought a polished metal hand trowel and a zinc watering can. Tomas began with the bed bordering the start of the stone path. He opened the first bag of new earth. The scent that rose was immediate and comforting. It was the aroma of fertile, damp earth, rich in nutrients, very different from the smell of ancient dust that had dominated the garden before. He took the hand trowel and began to spread the new earth over the old soil. The earth flowed from the trowel with a soft sound, covering the surface with a dark, fluffy layer. He mixed the new earth with the old, turning over the first few inches of soil to create a homogeneous bed. The texture of the mixture was perfect, loose enough to allow roots to grow, yet firm enough to hold moisture. He smoothed the surface with his ungloved hands, feeling the granular earth and fresh dampness against his skin. Next, he took the first pot from the box. It was a plant with dense, rounded leaves. He gently squeezed the sides of the thin plastic. The plastic crackled softly. He turned the pot upside down, supporting the plant's base with his hand, and pulled the container away. The root ball came out whole. The thin white roots formed a tight web around the pot's soil. With his thumbs, he gently massaged the base of the root ball, delicately loosening the roots so they would know they had space to grow. He used the trowel to open a hole in the prepared bed. The earth yielded easily. He settled the seedling into the center of the hole, ensuring the plant's base was level with the surrounding soil. Then, with both hands, he pushed the loose earth inward, filling the empty spaces around the roots. Then he pressed the soil around the stem firmly, using the palms of his hands. The movement secured the plant in place, anchoring it to the ground. The visual contrast was immediate. The vibrant green foliage stood out against the black earth and the pale gray of the stone path right beside it. Tomas repeated the process. He moved along the border, kneeling, maintaining a constant and tranquil rhythm. Dig the hole, loosen the roots, position the seedling, cover with earth, press. He alternated the plant's textures, creating an organic design, a wide-leaved plant next to one with thin silvery leaves. The garden began to gain a new layer of life, low and close to the ground. With each plant placed, the bed seemed more filled, more intentional. The work was meticulous and required care. His hands were completely covered in earth, but there was a tactile satisfaction in manipulating the soil and the plants. The silence of the garden was filled only by the sound of running water from the fountain in the background, the distant song of a bird, and the soft rustle of leaves as he settled them into their new places. When the last seedling was planted near the base of the wall, he stood up and stretched his back.
The beds, once bare strips of earth, now displayed a continuous line of fresh green. The plants were still small, but the promise of growth was there. He picked up the zinc watering can and walked to the stone fountain. He dipped the can into the basin, letting the clean water fill the container. The metal grew heavy and cold in his hand. He returned to the start of the path and tilted the can over the first seedling. Water flowed from the perforated spout, falling like a fine, controlled rain on the leaves and earth. The sound of water hitting the fluffy soil was a comforting whisper.
The dry earth absorbed the water instantly, darkening even further. Water droplets clung to the green leaves, sparkling like tiny lenses under the afternoon sun. Tomas walked slowly along the stone path, watering each plant carefully, ensuring the earth around the roots was well moistened. The scent of wet earth rose strong and clean, spreading throughout the air. It was the smell of a cycle beginning anew. The plants were anchored, quenched, and ready to transform that soil into their new home. The sun began to descend, changing the quality of light within the garden. The bright midday yellow gave way to a thick golden hue that entered at oblique angles through the leaves of the pruned trees. Shadows lengthened, drawing soft shapes across the ground and the stone walls. The physical work was done. The tools were clean and grouped near the entrance. Tomas stood, leaning against the frame of the heavy wooden door, gazing at the space that had revealed itself before him. The transformation was complete. What was once a dense, chaotic tangle of neglect now breathed with calm and purpose. Tomas's gaze traveled across the garden, absorbing the changes not merely as images, but as concrete sensations. The gray stone path, clean and level, cut through the space with a soft, inviting line. The stones, once hidden beneath years of decomposition, now reflected the golden light of the late afternoon. Tomas stepped forward and began to walk slowly. The soles of his boots touched the stone's rough and solid surface with a low, rhythmic sound. It was a sound of stability. He felt the firmness of the ground beneath his feet, a secure foundation that guided his steps towards the garden's heart. As he walked, he noticed the change in air temperature and movement. Before, the air inside had been stagnant, trapped by the ceiling of dead branches and tall weeds. Now, a light breeze passed freely, caressing his face and stirring the tall leaves of the trees. The clean canopies allowed the wind to circulate, creating a constant soft whisper in the living wood. The smell of mold and dust had completely vanished. In its place, the air carried the damp, rich aromat of newly watered earth, mingled with the subtle freshness of the new seedlings' green leaves. He looked at the path's edges. The beds, dark from the recent watering, highlighted the vibrant green of the small plants. Water droplets still sparkled on some leaves, catching tiny reflections of the sunlight. The plants seemed settled, as if they had always been there, silently absorbing the soil's strength and the light now permitted to them. The natural geometry of the leaves brought a soft texture that contrasted perfectly with the hardness of the path's stones and the ancient walls. Reaching the center of the garden, under the shade of the two large trees, Tomas paused. He looked up. The sky, now tinged with a deeper blue and shades of orange, was visible through the network of healthy branches. The architecture of the trees was majestic, freed from the weight of dead wood. They seemed like living pillars, supporting a canopy that protected yet did not imprison. The light filtering through the leaves created patterns of shadow and light that danced slowly over the path and the earth, a mosaic in constant, subtle motion. The dominant sound in the garden, however, came from the back, It was the continuous, tranquil voice of the water. Tomas followed the path's curve to the stone fountain set against the wall. Water flowed from the metal pipe in a constant, clear, and bright stream. The sound of water striking the stone basin's surface was hypnotic, a rhythmic note that anchored the surrounding silence. He approached the basin. The wet stone had darkened, revealing deep shades of gray and blue that weren't visible when dry. The water in the basin was crystalline, reflecting the sky above. Tomas extended his hand and let the stream of cold water run over his palm and fingers. The cool temperature was a pleasant relief. He felt the purity of the movement, the simple energy of something that flows without interruption. That walled space was no longer a repository of forgotten things. It was a refuge. The tall wall of ancient stones, which once seemed an oppressive barrier, now fulfilled its original role, to protect. It kept the outside world at bay, preserving the peace of that square of earth. The garden now possessed a palpable harmony. The solidity of the stones, the fluidity of the water, the rootedness of the plants, and the open space in the air coexisted in perfect balance. Tomas withdrew his hand from the water, lightly shook his fingers, and dried them on the side of his work pants. He felt no rush to leave. The contemplation of the outcome was the true reward for all the physical effort. Every tired muscle in his body seemed justified by the silent beauty of that place. The garden needed nothing more. It was clean, structured, and alive. The rest would be done by time and nature. Tomas walked back along the stone path, feeling the tranquility of the space seep into his own breath as the sunlight began to bid farewell to the treetops. Twilight slowly advanced, replacing the golden tones with a cool bluish light that softened all the garden's contours. Shadows ceased to be defined shapes on the ground and began to merge, filling the spaces between the trees and the walls. The bright green of the new leaves darkened, and the color of the path stones blended with the surrounding earth. The garden was preparing for the night. Tomas walked to the entrance where he had left his tools. He picked up the machete, the shears, the shovel, and the watering can, organizing them in a corner near the wall outside. The weight of the tools in his hands reminded him of the day's effort, a familiar and satisfying heft. The fatigue in his shoulders and legs was dense, a warm torpor that called for rest, but his mind was light, emptied of any worry. Tomas returned to the threshold of the solid wooden door. The darkened iron ring hung silent. He didn't pull it to close the door. Instead, he left the heavy wooden leaf resting against the stone frame, keeping the entrance almost entirely open. The garden no longer needed to be a locked secret. Tomas leaned his shoulder against the stone arch that formed the entrance. The stone was cool against his shirt, transferring the temperature of the night that was beginning to settle. He crossed his arms and looked into the darkened space. Without the sunlight to highlight colors and shapes, the garden became an experience of invisible sounds and textures. The night wind swept through the tall treetops, creating a long, continuous rustle, like the sound of a deep breath. It was a vast sound, filling the air above him. Under that sound, firm and unwavering, was the voice of the water. The continuous flow falling into the stone basin echoed through the wall's sides, a liquid, constant lullaby that marked the passing of seconds. The dampness from the newly watered soil began to rise, bringing a nocturnal scent of fresh earth and resting roots. It was an aroma that spoke of permanence and silent cycles. The nature within began its invisible work of absorbing water, firming roots, and growing in the dark. Tomas closed his eyes for a moment, just listening. The beat of the water, the wind in the leaves, the solidity of the stone wall at his back. Balance was restored.
He felt the rhythm of his own breath align with the calm rhythm of the environment. There was nothing more to cut, move, or plant. The space was whole again. He opened his eyes, took one last look at the stone path disappearing into the serene shadows, and left the hidden garden to the tranquil embrace of the night.
A stack of envelopes lay on the dark wooden table at the back of the small agency. It was an uneven pile, held together by a rubber band that was already losing its color. The letters had been there for 3 days. The constant rain that had fallen over the valley all week had turned the dirt roads into thick rivers of mud, preventing any safe crossing. No one had come down to the town, and no messages had gone up to the more distant homes. The flow of things was interrupted. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories, made to help you relax. And sometimes that's all we really need.
Vicente rose from the chair and walked to the wooden coat rack fastened to the wall. It was an old object with marks of use that darkened the edges and softened the material. The thick leather had molded over the years, gaining creases and textures that told the story of many journeys. He took the satchel from the hook, feeling the familiar weight of the wide strap in his hand. He carried the satchel to the table and unlatched the brass buckle. The metal was cool to the touch, and the pin slid easily through the worn hole in the strap. He opened the top flap, revealing the interior divided into 3 compartments. The scent of treated leather rose faintly, mingling with the freshness from the window. With calm movements, he began to transfer the bundles of letters from the table into the satchel. The first bundle, destined for the nearest houses, was tucked into the front divider. The paper slid against the soft leather with a muffled sound. He repeated the gesture with the other piles, arranging the weight so the satchel remained balanced. The last item was a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with cotton twine. He adjusted it at the bottom, ensuring it wouldn't crease the envelopes. When he finished, he closed the flap and threaded the strap through the brass buckle, tightening it to the exact point. He lifted the satchel and slung the strap over his head, letting it cross his chest and rest on his right hip. The wide strap settled on the shoulder of his thick fabric jacket. The weight was not excessive, but it was constant, a solid presence that would accompany him for the next few hours. Vicente walked to the front door. He took the bunch of keys from his trouser pocket and chose the largest one. The metallic jingle of the keys echoed briefly. He opened the door and stepped onto the sidewalk. The street air was much colder than the air inside the agency. It was a damp chill that touched his face and awakened his senses. He turned, inserted the key into the lock, and turned it. The internal mechanism clicked firmly, locking the heavy wooden door. Vicente put the keys back in his pocket, adjusted his jacket collar, and took the first step. The main street of the small town was still deserted. The uneven cobblestones glistened with the night's moisture. Rainwater had collected in the dips, forming small puddles that reflected the gray sky and the low rooftops. Vicente's footsteps sounded clear in the morning silence. The thick rubber soles of his boots met the damp stone with a firm, rhythmic sound. He walked slowly, feeling the texture of the ground change beneath his feet. Each step, the leather satchel swayed very lightly against his hip, accompanying his body's movement. The scent of the wet town was made of many layers. There was the aroma of wood smoke rising from a distant chimney, the smell of almond leaves fallen on the sidewalks, and the freshness of clean water still trickling through the gutters. The cobblestone street ended where the dirt road began. It was the boundary between the town and the valley. Vicente noticed the difference the moment his boot sole left the hard stone surface and touched the compacted earth. The sound of his steps changed immediately, becoming lower, softer. The earth was dark and saturated with water, but it wasn't slippery. The sand mixed with the clay gave firmness to his stride. He followed the dirt road, which curved gently along the contour of the first hills. The trees on the roadside were laden with water droplets. Every now and then, a light breeze passed through the branches, causing the leaves to sway and release a small private shower onto the ground. The sound of drops falling on the damp earth was like a continuous whisper.
Vicente adjusted his breath to the rhythm of his walk. The cold air entered his lungs, bringing a clean energy. He didn't think about the total length of the journey, only about the stretch beneath his feet at that moment. The landscape gradually opened up. The clustered houses were left behind, replaced by wooden fences and green fields that stretched to the base of the mountains. The day was slowly settling in, without strong sun, just a gentle clarity that made the valley's colors deeper and more restful. The dirt road descended in a long, gentle slope, leading Vicente towards the bottom of the valley. The sound of his footsteps on the damp earth began to blend with a continuous, low rumble coming from further ahead. It was the sound of the river. With the rains of the past few days, the waters had risen and the current was strong, rushing branches and leaves along. Vicente continued descending. The trees along the path began to grow taller, with thick trunks covered with green, damp moss.
The smell in the air changed. The aroma of open earth gave way to the fresh, mineral scent of running water and wet stones. The humidity down there was denser, almost palpable, clinging lightly to the skin of his face. Soon the road took a sharp turn, revealing the old wooden bridge that crossed the river. The wide planks were dark with water, and the supporting beams seemed sturdy despite their age. On the other side of the bridge stood the first house of the route. It was a simple construction, with white painted walls and blue-framed windows, surrounded by a low wall of stacked stones. Vicente stepped onto the bridge. The sound of water rushing beneath the planks was loud and filled the entire surrounding space. The wood yielded a fraction of a millimeter under the weight of his boot, emitting a very low, muffled creak. He walked slowly, feeling the slight vibration of the structure with each step. The water rushed agitatedly, forming white foam around the larger stones in the riverbed. Upon completing the crossing, he stepped back onto solid ground and walked to the house's stone wall. Attached to the rustic wooden gate was a galvanized metal mailbox. The box was shaped like a small house with a slanted roof to shed rain. The silver paint was worn at the corners, showing small patches of brown rust. He stopped before the gate. The leather satchel on his hip swayed and settled. Vicente opened the satchel's flap and reached into the first compartment. His fingers found the envelope destined for that house. The paper was intact, protected from the external dampness. He pulled out the letter and closed the satchel's buckle with his other hand. Carefully, he held the small handle of the mailbox's lid. The metal was very cold. He pulled the lid down. The hinge, unaccustomed to being opened daily, offered slight resistance and emitted a short, sharp squeak. The inside of the box was dark and dry. He slid the white envelope inside, ensuring it rested snugly at the bottom, away from any crack where the wind might enter. He released the lid, which fell back into place with a dry, metallic thud. The sound marked the completion of the first delivery. The message had reached its destination. The feeling of a duty fulfilled, even such a small task, brought a subtle relief. The satchel's weight had decreased almost imperceptibly, but Vicente knew there was one less envelope inside. He stepped away from the gate and looked at the house. The windows were closed and there was no movement in the yard. Only a dog barked twice somewhere in the back of the property, a sound muffled by the distance and the river's noise. A dewdrop, accumulated on a fern leaf hanging over the wall, grew too heavy and fell silently onto the dark earth. Vicente turned his back to the house and looked at the road ahead. The path now began to climb, moving away from the riverbank and entering a denser area of vegetation. The sound of the water gradually grew fainter as he took his first steps uphill. The pace of his walk changed, requiring a little more strength in his legs, but he maintained the same steady, unhurried cadence. The morning advanced, and the cold air from the valley bottom began to mix with slightly milder air currents descending from the slopes. The dirt road left the open riverbanks and plunged into a dense forest area. These were tall trees with straight trunks and rough bark, whose canopies met high above, forming a natural roof of dark leaves. As Vicente entered this stretch, the light changed. The gray, diffuse clarity of the sky was filtered.